Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Renito, Chief Scientist with the Institute for Digital Transformation. I want to welcome you to Digital Dialogue, where different industry experts discuss digital transformation topics and issues that are of concern to all businesses. Whether you are already a digital enterprise, or on your journey, or still trying to figure out what that all means, we know you'll find something here for you. Remember, as a LinkedIn Live session, this is your opportunity to interact with these experts. Post your comments and questions in chat for a full interactive experience. Welcome to Digital Dialogue.
Hi everyone, I'm 𝗥𝘆𝗍 and I want to welcome you to this special episode. 7 years ago, we formed the Institute Fellow Program, basically to bring together industry experts to share a viewpoint around digital transformation, that being that digital transformation is not about the technology. Today, we have 6 of our fellows on this call, and you'll have a chance to get to know them a little bit differently than before. So since they all do a much better job of it themselves, let me bring them on and introduce them. So Ray, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, John. I'm 𝗥ощ𝘆. I'm located in Greenville, South Carolina. My company is Product and Process Innovation, a consulting firm, but I'm also on the board of a couple of technology startups, one in the construction industry, one in the marketing tech, and then I teach with a couple of universities. My particular focus is in the area of technology deployment, and I've got several engineering degrees, electrical, mechanical, aeronautical, and with that work, I have been developing new products, developing new processes, putting those in place. And so for me, digital transformation really came into looking at how do we change the business with technology. Now, I started at this from a technology standpoint, but boy, I found out that culture is much more difficult than the technology piece. So, John, let's bring somebody else in.
All right. How about Alita? How about if you join us?
Hey, good morning, John and Ray. So thanks for having me today. My name is 𝗥ощ𝘆. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado. I work for a company called CGI. CGI is an international IT services and product company, and I run the Denver office. So our customers include state and local, commercial clients, enterprise clients. And I really, when I focus on transformation, it really is at the strategy level. So strategically, what does that look like for an organization? How do you execute that? And then I also really like to focus on the team building aspect of that, making sure that I have the appropriate team members in place and I'm able to enable them, right, to be successful in that transformation journey. So I also sit on a number of nonprofit boards, and I'm a strong supporter of women in leadership and especially technology leadership. So thanks again.
Great. So Roy, how about you come on and give us your perspective?
Hi, I'm Roy Atkinson. I'm the CEO and Principal Advisor at 𝗥𝘆 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 LLC. We're a business advisory firm based in the Greenville-Spartanburg area of South Carolina, right down the road from 𝗥ощ𝘆. I'm also on the Strategic Advisory Board of HDI, which is an Informa tech company specializing in IT service management and support. And I contributed the chapter on customer experience to the book Digital Transformation Demystified, right behind me there, which comes from the Institute. And my expertise is in the area of experience management, both customer and employee experience, which I believe to be inextricably linked. We work with several companies that offer experience management and measurement tools, including artificial intelligence and predictive analytics.
Great, thank you. So how about we ask Wendy to join us? Wendy, welcome.
Great to be here and join you all. I'm Wendy 𝗥𝘆, and I'm from the States, lived in New York, but I now live in Norway. And I run a company called S2E Transformation, Strategy to Execution Transformation. And my role in transformation is to architect transformation at a macro level. So I work with leaders to understand the business direction and business outcomes and translate that into a coordinated set of changes across business and technology, give us a target picture to work towards and a high-level strategic roadmap. I also work with organizations to help them build their end-to-end strategy to execution capability. That's really important to be able to get ideas into action or strategies into reality. And I also help organizations to build business architecture practices to underpin that process.
Great. So how about we have one of our newest fellows join us, 𝗥. Although 𝗥 is one of our newest fellows, I've actually known him longer than everybody else on the call.
Hello, John. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name's 𝗥𝘆𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗀. I am based in Tampa, Florida, but today I'm calling from an undisclosed client location outside the US. So my company is 𝗙𝗵𝘆 Partners. We spend most of our time developing solutions and products from the ground up and focus on strategic transformations, including digital transformations at the strategy and operational level. I'm also the CEO. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've launched a few companies. One of them was in AI. The one that I'm working on right now, it's actually a company that has a treatment for Alzheimer's, but that's a whole different story. For this particular conversation, I think the relevant background is that I started out as a technologist with a background in electrical engineering and computer science, and over the years became fascinated with transformation. So I built up expertise and background to do that through M&A, startups, turnarounds. And for the last couple of decades, I've spent most of my time at the intersection of technology, operations, and product development. And I work with private equity, venture capital, and C-suite teams of their portfolio companies to kind of figure out what's the overall strategy. And then I hands-on work with their teams, technology, operations, and product to translate that to actual operating market solutions.
Thank you. And last, but definitely not least, my cohort in crime on many of these episodes, and you see him at the beginning of every one. Frank, take it away.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'll be brief because everybody else is better than me, so that's really cool, which I really, really love. Dr. Frank Rennito, managing partner and chief scientist here with the Institute. I'm located on the beautiful Delaware shore, about 3 miles from the Atlantic beach, which is a nice place to be this time of year. My focus is really on all the intellectual property with the Institute, and my doctoral dissertation was on organizational culture, which is translated into a lot of the IP that we have here at the Institute. And I have found that culture permeates everything. And when we looked at all the chapters these esteemed fellows put forth, there were culture snippets in each one of those chapters. So that thread runs deep. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Frank. All right, so let's get right into it. One of the things that I said, everybody here is going to the same destination. We're all looking at, transformation not being about the technology, but we've all had some aha moment at some point in our career that bless to that. So I think a fun place to start for an aha moment would be with an engineer. But before I bring them on, I'm going to ask anyone in the audience, if you'd like to share your aha moment when you realized that digital transformation wasn't about the technology, put it in the chat and we'll talk about it. But now let's go to the engineer. 𝗥?
Okay. Nice. Well done, John. So, well, it's interesting. Mine came about 3 decades ago. I know I'm dating myself, but I was working for UPS as a strategic planner, and my focus was technology and innovation. And I had just finished giving what I thought was an awesome, outstanding presentation to the executive team and the CEO of UPS about all the cool technology initiatives and things that I had in our portfolio and the strategy for every one of them. And I thought I was doing great. And then the CEO, a great man, a true visionary, as Nelson, asked me, so kid, I was the youngest. I was the youngest director, and one of the youngest directors in the company at the time. I was like 29. He said, so kid, cool stuff, but tell me, how are you going to convince all of our operators that the information about moving the package is as important as moving the package. And it was like, oh, yeah, because they don't know that. They don't care about that. Their job is to move the package. If they don't understand why it's as important to move the information along the way, they're not going to do it. We're going to give them systems they're not going to use. And that's kind of when it started me down the path of technology by itself doesn't transform companies. It transforms environments, but companies need to transform across the entire spectrum. So that was my very first aha moment.
Thank you. So 𝗿𝗏𝗏, you deal with lots of companies every day going through this. What was your aha moment?
You know, John, I think years ago I took a transformative CIO role, and it was right when lots of new technology was coming out. So it was, how do you implement all this? And so I was very heads down focused in the tech. And I realized as I took a step back to put together the teams to support the tech, that not only did I have to make sure my technology worked, but if I didn't have the people, then it didn't really matter, even just the people to implement it, let alone the environment, right, in which to cultivate that change. And then taking it a step further, I also had to ensure that the business side that I worked with, that they were enabled, right, to accept this change and be in the right mind state. And so one of the best partner stories, I think, as I was working in an organization, we had to partner with an organization that did debt collection. So really fun topic, right? But people who collect school loans and taxes and all kinds of things. And it was a really impressive organization. But before we could have a strategic conversation about change, the owner of that organization was bound and determined that we were going to basically feed his fish. And the reason for that is he had in his office a huge fish tank, like the ones at Bass Pro, the big ones. So here we are, there's like 6 of us, and we're traipsing up this steel ladder type thing. And back in the days of professional dress, right? And so we're hiking up this ladder, and we're all standing at the top, and we all had to feed the fish before we could go have a conversation about how we could transform our business. So not what I expected to do that day, but definitely it was something on his priority list that we had to address before we could have a conversation.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So again, in terms of things, I know, Ray, you do a lot of work with different government agencies. And that has got to be challenging. I know in the past when I've had to deal with the NSA, I don't even want to talk about it, but go ahead.
Well, actually, instead of a government agency right now, I'm going to talk about a project I did with a university, kind of like a government agency, big bureaucracy.
Yeah, just as bad. Just as bad.
This university, this is about 10 years ago now. This university had recently introduced online education. So they had a bunch of online degrees, and initially things went well, and then they were seeing that their enrollment was tapering off, and they were trying to figure out why, and they still had lots of people applying, but not very many actually enrolling. I was brought in to look at the process, because I being a process improvement kind of guy, I could look at that, and I was going to apply lean to it and figure out ways to improve what was happening there. Well, online education, so the application was all online, but this was a university that was used to getting paper applications. So they would take a report that comes from the online form, and they had a person in the office who typed it in to their paper application. And then it would go to, and of course, just depending on how things were going, at times that person would be 2 or 3 weeks behind schedule.
Yeah.
So you put in your online application, and it's weeks until you hear anything back. And I asked, why are we doing this? And they said, well, because that's how our system works. And I said, but you could just have these systems talk to each other. And it was just a blank stare. You could do that. It was just totally cool. Then I hit all the resistance items of, well, but our accreditation requires it. Well, no, your accreditation did not require it. You required it. Accreditation requires you have records, but it didn't tell you had to type it into that form. And then it was, well, but these two systems don't talk to each other. That's only because you haven't put the connection together. And then it was, well, but the person who types it in, that's her job. We also have 3 open requests, personnel requests that she could be doing with it. There was just one point of resistance after the other of the organization. None of it was technology. It was all culture. It was all paradigm, and just breaking that out. That was when I said, okay, this is not a technology issue anymore. This is now culture. This is now how people think. This is how people create a business model that makes sense for what they're trying to do.
Ray, I worked in the government for 30 odd years, and I will tell you that it was a great place to be. I enjoyed my career, but your description has triggered PTSD for me, because there's like a library, whether you're a worker or a manager or an executive, there's a library of excuses of how we can't do something. And anyway, I don't want to take up any more time, but you've triggered a whole lot of other stories that I can't get into right now because of time. So
well,
sorry.
No, Frank, tell us your aha moment. You're
as long as I'm here. Oh, okay. So I have 3. So I was doing my finishing up my or in my doctorate studies around 2008, 9, 10. And I was trying to focus on, what you have to kind of focus stuff. And I knew I wanted to do something around IT service management because I was an ITIL expert and et cetera. And ITSM is a big transformation effort, not unlike digital transformation. They're all transformation efforts. So one of my professors helped me narrow it down to culture. And I tell you, it was the best discussion I've ever had. So I finished up the dissertation, all well and good. Everything's on paper, very academic. So I'm also a certified project manager. And I was contracted to do a project management course, boot camp, a PMP boot camp for a government agency. And it was on site, downtown DC. Course was supposed to start at 8:30 in the morning. I get there at 8 o'clock. I'm all set up, ready to go. 8:30 rolls around. 1 or 2 people show up. 8:45, 1 or 2 people are still there. 9 o'clock, 9:15, everybody else starts strolling in. So this starts happening over the course of 3-4 days. And finally on the last day, and here's the big aha. The last day, there was somebody from out of town and they were staying at a hotel. So they were there locally. They had nothing else to do, right? I said, so let me ask you, what's going on here? I said, oh, that's just the way it is. You're just late to meetings. Nobody cares. I said, really? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And he said, well, let me tell you a story. Said, we had a new CIO here. And he came to a meeting and nobody was there. And he wondered why nobody was there. He thought they missed the meeting or whatever. Leaves. He finds this chronic that people are now late for meetings. Rather than set an example and insist people get in their seats at the time of the meeting, he works around the process. He gets one of his staff assistants as a runner to go to the meeting to see if anybody's there. If nobody's there, the runner comes back and just says, nobody's there. If somebody's there, then he'll come down to the meeting. I'm saying, what a weird, that was the day I learned that culture was everything in an organization, no matter what you're doing. ITIL, project management, digital transformation. It was a ridiculous moment, sending a runner down to see if people were at the meeting. And if nobody was there, he didn't go. Yeah, I know. that is unbelievable. Anyway, that was my aha moment, and I chuck you side on that, and I know.
Oh, it's just amazing. It's funny. I sit on a couple of university boards, and the expression I use is Byzantine. The culture is Byzantine. It's like you just never know which way it's gonna go, and the stuff you sit there and you're like, I call it my Scooby-Doo moments. Huh? What?
Well,
I have so many Scooby-Doo moments. So what the heck is going on?
And by Byzantine, you mean like archaic, ceremonial,
Archaic, yes. Yeah,
and
exactly.
very
Right.
steeped in tradition,
Yep.
and really no actions behind the ceremony. It's all very facade-like. Yeah, I
Yep.
totally
All
get it.
right, so let's get our other two fellows in here to give us their aha moments. Wendy,
Sorry
you're gonna
about that.
take our lead now.
Right on. So I think my aha moments are wrapped up in customer experience, having done a lot of enterprise-wide, sort of top-to-bottom customer experience. And, you know, of course, we can look at experience from the just pure technology perspective. We're delivering products, services, experiences through new digital channels. We're, you know, adding customer insights and things like that. But I've realized, you know, to really do customer experience well and cohesively across an organization, you've got to rally people to really understand what that experience looks and feels like across those journeys, the personas. You have to really get people to care about the customer experience and something greater than themselves. I'll say a bigger why. But my big aha moment pertains to the silos and how challenging that can be. And my aha is that in order to show up as one company with a cohesive experience for a customer, you really have to be one company internally, right? So it's like the customer experience and really being a cohesive company, they're two sides of one coin. And, you know, especially for large established companies, that can mean removing a lot of redundancy, right, across systems, integrating people, process, technology, and to the, you know, culture points that that we're all bringing up here. Working together across those different silos really pushes on the structures, the culture, the motivation mechanisms, how we invest, how we make decisions for the greater good and for the customer really often needs to change. So that's my aha.
Well, that is the perfect lead-in, if in terms of customer experience, to bring us to our expert in customer experience, Roy.
My aha moment requires me to take digital transformation apart for a second and separate the transformation from the digital, which we should all be doing anyway. But my aha moment goes back about 24 years. And at the time I was working at the Jackson Laboratory, which is one of the world's foremost genetics research institutions. And I was part of a Y2K project. Okay. And my job was to certify that 3,369 software applications that were running at the laboratory on Apple machines, Mac, which is used most often in genetic research, if you're not aware of that. Make sure that those software, whether it was commercial or proprietary, was free of any risks of failure because of a date dependency. We knew that the Macs didn't have a Y2K problem, but what about all the software that was running on them? And these were, as I said, over 3,000 applications. So part of that was updating or removing all the software across the organization that failed to meet that requirement, which included Microsoft Excel, but I won't go there. Or did I?
Yeah, you did.
You use your outside voice.
Yes. So updating the software was the easy part. Convincing senior scientists that they needed to change the way they did their work was the hard part, right? Scientists, if you're not aware of them or haven't worked with them, mostly are very change averse. They get one way to do everything they do, and they're, because of the nature of the work, they try to be very methodical, and they try to repeat things exactly the same way multiple times, and so their habits are extremely hard to break. And it's to convince somebody who's just been nominated for a Nobel Prize is difficult. So it was a lot of fun. Let me put it that way.
All right, that's a lot of great stories. And we actually have one here from, and Chuck and I might remember this one. So,
Michael.
So the first days of AT&T Solutions, all the AT&T guys show up in front of the customer and hand each other business cards. Oh yeah, we don't even know each other. And I remember those days back then. But let's talk. A couple of you touched on real world, real life experiences.
John, so there's what it's interesting because Wendy said something and it just, so I wrote about it because it was just fascinating to me. The one thing I tell people is you cannot put a digital front end to an analog back end. If you do that, you're literally going to just screw things up. And the one that I wrote about, it was just fascinating to me. So there's this automotive services company and that I've worked with and good people. And I haven't talked to them in a while. So I get a call from one of their private equity and says, we had a problem, which that's how they usually start their calls when they call me. Hey, we had a problem. So what's the problem? He goes, we did this whole thing with our customers and it backfired. Take a look at it. Here's what they did. So the chief marketing officer, smart guy, voracious consumer of data, recognized a pattern that like 30% of their customers were complaining about their ability to do appointments for the service base. And as a good CMO, went to the CEO, asked for some money, convinced the CIO to put a project together, and they built this absolutely gorgeous, well thought out, automated scheduling system to schedule the service base. And they launched. And within 2 days, the complaint rate went to literally 100%. Because all the people that worked on building the digital front end for the scheduling had no freaking clue what's involved in scheduling a service bay. In their mind was, we got 19 service bays, an appointment takes this much time, we're going to schedule the customers and off we go. They never bothered to call up the people, the service manager and say, okay, why is it so screwed up in the analog world in the first place before we automated the screw up? And they found out that, you don't just schedule a bay. You schedule a bay, make sure you have the parts, the technician with the right certifications to work on that particular problem, to make sure that if you're going to keep the car in pieces for X period of time, you got to make sure you meet all the regulations. And they were like, oh. So literally, customers would go on, they would schedule an appointment based on service availability, they'll book the bay, they show up, and the service manager would say, I don't have a technician qualified to work on this problem. Or, I'm glad you brought that up. They'll put it up, they stand it up, and the technician will go to the service manager and say, well, I need these parts. And the manager will say, I don't have those parts. You got to wait. So now they wouldn't have a car taken apart, sitting in a bay with no parts. So, we had to kind of like shut it down and go back and say, all right.
Yeah. All right. I see a lot of people nodding. Who wants to jump in here?
I'll do it. Chuck, putting a digital front end to an analog back end back in the 90s, and I mean 1990s, for those of you.
We know you're old, but you're not that old, Frank.
We're not that old, right? Back in the 90s, I was working for a government agency, and we were doing an HR and payroll system redesign.
Is this one of those 3-letter agencies that shall not be named?
No, it was actually a 2-letter agency at that point in my career. I was at a disclosed location. Let's put it that way. So we had to look at all the processes so that we could automate them. So I went out on the road, visited these regional offices because everything was distributed. And I asked them to walk me through their process. And basically it was centered around this 7-part form, this multi-part form, carbons. And so, okay, when you do this, where does it go? Well, we do this, it goes here. We do this, and then it goes there. And then there was these 3 or 4 parts of the form. Where do these go? Well, you just put them in the file cabinet over there. We don't know what they do. Turns out that the processes they were executing were left over from like 2 generations of automation before. So you had different steps along the way that didn't need to be done because they had to be done because they were using a TSO terminal with an IBM 360 or something like that. And so I said, well, we're not going to put a digital front end in front of that stupid process. We don't need these steps anymore, right? So as soon as you said that, Chuck, I had this, oh yeah, that's ridiculous. Why? And nobody could. I visited several regional offices up and down the East Coast. And I said, okay, well, here's what I learned from that office. What do you do with this? Oh, we just tear them out and we put them. That was a little like this inbox of a stack of these tissue carbons. And I don't know what they did with them. And neither did they. So they were left over from a bygone era of stone knives and bearskins automation. So, Chuck, thanks for triggering that memory. Oh.
I do that to Frank a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you triggered a lot of people back in the old days, Chuck, but we won't go there.
Right.
I'm going
to that. Go ahead, Roy.
It's something that Chuck said too. And this is a relatively recent aha moment, and maybe a lot of you are ahead of me on this one. One of the big ones I've had lately is that I realized that maybe driving change is not the right approach. Now, let me explain what I mean. Using the data from experience management to help employees pull change through an organization, I've seen that be more likely to be successful instead of trying to drive change from the top. And if you look back at the last decade or so and think about bring your own device, the consumerization of IT, shadow IT, the use of mobile devices in the workplace, and so on, it starts to become clear that employees are pulling change all the time. Your customers and your employees can help your transformation efforts if you work with them. And do senior leaders get to choose what changes they wish to make? Of course they do. But being an ally to your employees and taking cues from customer experience data can certainly have a positive impact on your change efforts.
Yeah,
Well, I really saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that, Roy, a couple of years ago. I was working with a nonprofit organization, and they were looking to convert their backroom systems to an automated system, all paper-based stuff. They had actually tried to do it twice before, and it was totally rejected by the people they service and their internal employees. That it just went nowhere. They just couldn't get it to happen. Finally, we used a different approach. Is we brought the employees in and said, okay, you design the system for us. Instead of us getting this off-the-shelf system and trying to force it on you, you tell us what we want, design the system for us. They designed explained the system the way they wanted. We were able to then convert an off-the-shelf package relatively easily at that point. Once we really understood those requirements, convert those. But now it was a pull, an employee pull, and it just the happy ending on this is we launched that system about 3 months before COVID hit, and when COVID hit, everybody had to go remote. They could do everything they needed to do remotely. And 6 months before that would have been impossible because they had to be in the office doing everything on paper. But having made that change in time, we were able to then continue to provide services without even a hiccup. But it was the employees actually designing that and looking at the culture and how do the customers, how do the people they serve, this nonprofit serves, how do they use it, how do the employees use it, and instead of us trying to force it, let them tell us how to work with it.
I think that even if you have a group of people who are willing to do that internally, I worked on a large transformation project for a workflow, and there were multiple departments in the organization. And when you put them all together in the same room, they had no idea what the other one did. And they were like, wow, you really do it that way? Well, we would like to do it that way, but we can't do it that way because of, the age old, we just don't do it that way. And so, but it took them the better part of 18 months to really break down, being break down, here's all of our process, fighting about whose process was best. We had to get through that too, right? So there's a little culture around that. But to get to the point where they could even agree on here's what our new quote best practice even really looks like. So I think they there's a lot of value in, there's a lot of value in doing that, but then there's still, people don't take a step back and they're so heads down, they don't even realize the impact, positive or negative, that they're having until someone kind of raises it up.
Well, and to that point, Alita, I don't think we would have been able to get the group to work together to define it if we hadn't already failed twice. So there was already the two failures. They're going, we got to do something. This is just awful.
Failure will do that too.
That actually helped to break some of the barriers down and give them an idea of what maybe could happen because of some of the things they'd seen in the failed systems.
Well,
speaking of failed twice, so that's actually where my aha moment comes from, is a enterprise-wide customer change of address. Failed twice because they were solving it much too narrow. But when you took a bigger holistic look, used the business and IT architectures, figured out what was really going on, we realized that customers would call one part of the business, but since there was no common view of the customer, they would keep getting address at the old places, right? So that bigger view helped us identify, okay, listen, we actually don't have this holistic view. We have all this duplicated data. And actually picking up a point that you all were sharing earlier, honestly, the way we solve this, when we first were trying to fix it, we put a bandage on it. We faked it, right? We actually put like a web form out there so it seemed like they were submitting for the company, right? And then we were knitting it together in the background until we could get the rest of the transformation and systems.
Yeah, we would call that screen scraping kind of stuff, right? And that you just put that thing on, scrape the screen, put the data and feed it to the analog back end. Yeah, cool.
Fake it till you make it.
But here's an interesting. So I had this conversation a couple of months ago. Large company, they've been doing this for 20 years. Data development team, large development shop, and I said, "Well, it's a regulated industry, and that's all I'm going to say." So I said, can you help me understand the difference between a consumer, a customer, and an account? Like, what do you mean? Well,
and you said, I asked you first.
I said, well, an agency and a consumer protection agency looks at the consumer profile. Our customers, that's a B2C product, look at the customer, but a system deals in accounts. If I'm a consumer, can I have two accounts? No. Well, actually, yes, I can. If I'm a customer, can I have one consumer profile impact that changes me as a customer that impacts my account? Yes. Well, where is it in a data structure? So the digital structure did not reflect the analog realities, right? So how do you transform that? It takes a change in the way you think about things, right? What's the user experience has to start with what's a user, right? I mean, it's a very challenging. It's not an easy thing, that's for sure.
Ray, your example there of doing a major effort, and then when COVID hit, everybody was able to transition pretty easily or seamlessly. And I think we've talked about this in previous fellows meetings, where there was a lot of cultural resistance to remote work.
Right.
But when you're forced to do that, this is where the marriage of digital technologies and digital transformation come together. I can use my technologies to solve this transformation problem, and in the meantime, kick open the door of remote work and change the culture. Not only that, especially we've seen it in the health systems field where you can't visit your doctor. So all these processes and whatnot. We talked about business transformation. All these processes around changing that experience for the consumer. Now I think we have the opposite problem with return to work culture. Right? People are resisting that. Do I really need to be there? I mean, look at us. Yep. We are in different parts of the world for the most part, and somebody brought something up the other day from a cultural or experience perspective. When we're on a Zoom meeting or something like this, John, I think you remember this. This is the only platform or meeting platform or experience where we see ourselves in the meeting. Chuck, was that you who mentioned that?
It's so
It's so Chuck, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's research. It's dissonance.
Yeah.
It's it's
Isn't that
cognitive
weird?
overload. Yeah.
Like we're used to that, but if you're in a meeting, you don't have a mirror there looking at yourself, making sure you don't have spinach on your teeth. Your hair looks
sorry,
Frank.
Frank, I'm sorry. You've never been in a real meeting with Chuck.
Come on, it's a rumor that I walked on a table pounding my shoe on it at one point. Nasty rumor, didn't happen.
That whole cultural thing about we kicked open the door, like this resistance went away to remote work, and now we have resistance to return to work.
So Frank, here's a question for Alita though, because I see it's a conversation that it's not just the customer, it's not just the players, it's not just the employees. So Alita, I know you guys do a lot of development work, right? So I would imagine you deal with this. So a lawyer friend of mine is presenting at a conference this week and called me up and says, hey, give me some ideas how government agencies screw up development contracts. And I said, they write development specifications. She goes, well, isn't that the idea? I'm like, yeah, and they don't know how to do that. They're outdated. They send you a 75-page spec document that's got 1,700 items on it on the software, and you have no idea what you're supposed to deliver to them. Instead of, hey, you know what? I would rather you send me 100 user stories or what you're trying to do and drive my team crazy on figuring out how to tell you what the solution is going to look like, instead of giving me 90-page worth of technology specs. I mean, and I see that in the government agency stuff that I work with. What about, I would imagine your space, you have it even more, right?
I got one for you. It's not only in the world of development from the software perspective or the technology perspective that happens. I worked years and years ago when I was a young squirt for the second largest producer of cans in the world. We got a call from the Pentagon, which got to me because I was an inside sales guy, said, we want to produce coffee cans. And we were selling cans to Savarin, Maxwell House, all the big producers of coffee. They said, we want 1 pound coffee cans. So I said, okay, send me the spec. They sent me the spec. I immediately called them back and it said, you realize that these cans are 1/16 of an inch narrower and 1/16 of an inch taller than any other cans on the planet. And they said, yes, but that's the way we want them. And I said, okay. So we sent them a proposal, which required us to retool an entire plant to produce that can, right? Yes, we didn't get the contract. The bigger can company did, but that's typical.
Well, where there's a bill, there's a way, right?
Can I share my favorite story on culture, Frank, since you brought up culture?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
Real quick, Fortune 500 company. I used to work with the department heads of each of the customer-facing areas. Weekly meetings, everybody's kind of aloof, doing their own thing. Yeah, coordinating as we need to be here. The CEO comes out and says, in a digital customer connected world, we can't work in islands anymore. Everybody needs to be a good enterprise citizen. That mandate from the CEO, 180 on every one of those leaders in the same monthly meeting I used to have with them. Now they are all clamoring to own stuff, sponsor stuff, and be a good enterprise citizen. So just curious if any of you all have like a real powerful example like that, but just total change in behavior.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me, since we're running up on time, let me move to wrap us up a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to, each of you take 30 seconds, and I'm going to give you a magic wand. So you can change one thing about a company you're working with, your own company, whatever. What's that one thing that you would change to make life a lot easier? Since I see her nodding a lot, I'm going to pick on Wendy first. Wendy, what's your magic wand?
Oh, I want the magic wand. Clarity of purpose, people orienting and backing the purpose and letting that drive what they do over their own sort of motivations and focuses. and just clarity of strategic intent across and throughout the layers of an organization so we can act on it.
All right. So Chuck, what's your magic wand?
You know, it's funny you should ask that because I'm not as precise as Wendy, but I do have the thing that I ask all the time. Can you answer 3 questions in 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes? Same 3 questions, it's just more detail. So what? Then what? Now what?
Oh, you stole mine.
Hey, sorry.
I got to think of another one.
Sorry, but that's it. I mean, I've been saying that for years. If you can answer those 3 questions in 30 seconds, there's no way you can answer them in 3 minutes, 30 minutes, let alone produce a strategy, a transformational strategy that cuts across the organization. So that would be my magic wand.
So
I would add to that too, because I've worked in, anytime I do innovation or have a conversation, I'm always asking my team, what else? And if you sit there and wait 10 or 15 seconds until the awkward silence is over, then usually somebody will come up with another what else.
So is that your magic wand?
I've used that repeatedly. So yes, that gets a lot of traction. What else can you tell me about whatever it is that we're talking about?
All right. So Frank, since Chuck stole yours, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Wow. You put me on the spot. Well, hey, I tell you what I'm going to do. You put me on the spot. If it's ad-libbing you want, you're going to be sorely disappointed because I can do that. Wendy, I'm going to answer your question with my magic wand. You talked about people being good enterprise citizens. Well, my magic wand is people should understand that if you want something done, measure it. What gets measured gets done. And I encountered that just yesterday. I don't even remember the example, but what gets measured gets done. So if you're not going to measure it, I'm not going to do it. So if you want something done, figure out some KPI or whatever it is, and people will start doing it because you're checking on them. So that's my magic wand.
All right.
Thanks,
so
Chuck.
Ray, what's yours?
The ability to remove an anchor that's holding a paradigm in place. And I see that time and again, that there's the paradigm that we can't shake loose. I was working with a government agency at one point that they're a research lab. They respond to questions that come from politicians and whomever. It normally would take them 3 years to be able to get a report out. Not because it took 3 years to gather the data. Often they were mining existing databases, and the analysis would take 3 weeks. But the paradigm of, we have to first put this into the budget, then we have to set up a team, we have to do, and all the things they had to go through. I remember one of the program managers telling me, I really wish we could find a way to change this, because that way our agency could finally become relevant. And I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a government agency that was relevant, because they're able to actually answer a question that was being asked them and not wait 3 years to get the answer to an immediate question. But removing that anchor that holds people back from thinking they could break the paradigm, that's what I'd like to be able to do, so they can really look at what they're doing differently and then find a way to now do that well.
Okay, Roy, bring us home.
Oh boy, I get to. I was just on Amazon ordering my magic wand, so I was a little distracted. My magic wand would have management listen. So it's a big magic wand, but
you don't ask for much. You don't ask for much.
I really don't. No, never. But I always think of a guy who's out there installing a street light, and I saw this, by the way, installing a street light as they're redoing a street in a neighboring town here. Greer, if you're interested, Ray. And they put the street light right smack in front of the door of one of the local businesses. And I thought the guy who put that street light in, and undoubtedly was a guy, put the street light in, at some point stood back and said, this is a stupid place to put the street light, but that's what they want. And I think that at some point, one of the other people on the team said, and this was probably a woman, said, that's a really bad place to put that. What do you think, boss? Should we really put it here? And boss said, that's what they want. So rethink what you're doing, for goodness sake, and listen to what the people are telling you.
All right. Well, thank you all. This has been a fun 50 minutes. And by the way, this just gives you a slight feel for what our monthly Institute fellow beings are like.
Yeah.
Because we have only half of them here. And there were a couple of alumni who used to be at those meetings too. And oh my God. So at any rate, we used to post some of those on our YouTube channel, and I may start that again. So thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Join us again in, it's going to be 3 weeks, not 2 weeks, for our next digital dialogue. Bye everyone.
Ciao.
Bye, folks.
Ciao. Bye.
Thank you for joining our digital dialogue. Be sure to join our next digital dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.